Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so excited today to be joined by the always wonderful Regina Hall to talk about her latest Hulu series, Nine Perfect Strangers. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about is when you first took on this role and you were looking at the scripts with the character of Carmel, you've spoken a little bit about how you weren't necessarily entirely sure straight away what her voice was and who she was as a character and how you really wanted to capture the essence of her in your performance. And it sounds like it was a few days before production that it kind of all felt like it really clicked in. And so I was interested in what were those kind of grounding details that you really figured out and that moment that everything started to click into place for you in terms of seeing her as a character and understanding how you wanted to bring her into your performance?
Gosh, that's a really good question. For initially, I did not have all the scripts at once. So there were pieces of her, that were in the first and second and third episode. And as you read each episode, you're like, oh wait, there's this. Okay. And then there's this. So um I don't know. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the process is, but there's a thing where you're like, oh, this is her. And I think it does help once you figure out, there's her physical manifestation, what she looks like, her hair, and then I think those details help you be able to hone in on, because I guess it's discovering her emotional life that helps you discover what that might manifest as in terms of how someone expresses themselves to the world. Um, and I don't know. I guess you keep reading it, you keep thinking about it, you keep writing down. Well, for me, everyone's different, but details of their life and where they grew up and who was her husband and how did they pray, all the little minutia, and then I don't know. One day it just like you're like, oh, I think that's it. And then once you get that, then it all comes. So that's not a very good answer, but yeah, I don't know. When I don't know if you do it, but you play something, it's like it's over and over. Like the thought of everything about this person is like always in the back of your mind, and you're like, until you don't think about it and until it just is, and then you're like, oh, then you can show up and do anything, any scene, because then you that make any sense?
It makes so much sense. And I love that you were bringing up the physical manifestations of this character because that's one of the really striking elements and representations of where she is internally, like the way that you're holding your hands incredibly close to your body. And there's kind of this timidness to a lot of her body structure in a lot of moments. And even just tonally, the voice that you found for her as a character, where it's leaning into the slightly higher registers, it's a little bit whispery and there's a lot of uncertainty and almost like she's asking questions rather than making statements when she speaks. And were those physical manifestation aspects things that were part of that journey of finding her beforehand, or were those things that once you were on set with the rest of the cast and you were shooting that you found a lot of the physical embodiment of her as a character?
I think once we started, I think, we had rehearsals and, which was great. It's always great to be able, and not rehearsals isn't going over, but it was kind of talking about the scenes, reading them. And I think, yeah, I think you just can't help, once you kind of know who a character is, like, so how is she like this, right? She could not, she could be, there's a version, you know what I mean? But in the version, it wouldn't, she wouldn't, there's the ability to connect is somehow, it's so desired, but there's always a miss that you can see in Carmel. So I think, yeah, I think it was just very instinctive that uh, um, her body language was what it was. Not that I remember in detail, but but yes, yeah. I think it was yes. It did come. Her walk. It's that that self-esteem was just not there to allow her to break forth into the world and in a way that most people can, even if they don't feel amazing, they're able to. But Carmel doesn't have it.
Yeah. And with that idea of self-esteem, there's that conversation very early on where she's talking about what she wants from this process. And for her, it's a complete transformation. You know, she's like, I want self-esteem building, I want weight loss, I want a total mind and body transformation, which shows us just how internally and externally she's just completely broken and how low her self-esteem and self-worth is at that point. And what did you kind of think and construct to be the tipping point that causes her to come to this retreat and to come to this space and to really be looking for something that's just going to completely re-evolve herself, even though it's probably not going to happen in the space of 10 days?
Yeah. You know, I think there's a hope of some sense of resolution. I think when she goes there, I mean, I know for sure that she has an intention, and I think those are the expressions of that intention. But I think when Carmel is going, every character has their own intention. I think for me, you know, uh, realizing it and knowing like this is purposeful, and where there's purpose there's hope. And so I think that there's a part of Carmel that I think people do feel hopeful for, even if even if they don't see it. You want her to win, and I think that's a big part of it too, is that um she knows why she's going, and that thing has been a problem in her mind. You can imagine how certain things they continue, to play over, and you're like, where's the moment that my life changed? And I think she's like, if I go here, this is the moment that my life changed, and if I go confront the moment, then maybe, it'll be better.
And it's interesting looking at all the dynamics of her relationship with her ex-husband and all of the emotional baggage and trauma that she's carrying from that. And the fact that, we learn that she used to work on Broadway and she held these very highly esteemed jobs and clearly had a value that he stripped away a lot. And even though they're not together anymore, that he still has such a huge hold over her. But at the same time, he's not a physical character that we've seen in the series at this point.
Right.
And so was that a really interesting dynamic and challenge for you in constructing a character where so many elements of who she is are to do with relationships that we never see on screen because she's around people that she's never met before, and all of these relationships are completely new to her?
Yeah. I think that's the fun part. I mean, that's just part of a backstory. I mean, even when you have your husband on screen, one of the things you sit and do is you're like, where did we meet? And like, did we ever break up? And how long we were together? And like, what was what was our first kiss? Did we sleep together on the first date? You're creating all the stuff. So I think for at least for me, it was fun to think about, Carmel and her husband and their history, and what their home life was like, at least to her. And then also create all the things that you see in hindsight, because now she's out of the relationship. So, what does she realize or not? I mean, I do think that there there was the loss of the relationship for her, but there's certain things that had to pre-exist.
And with that idea as well, that she is surrounded by a group of strangers, and there's always that veneer of presentation and meeting somebody new, and you don't necessarily immediately go in and reveal your insecurities and your vulnerabilities and all elements of your true self. And so was that an interesting construct to think about what's the version of herself that she's presenting herself as and who she's trying to be at the beginning, and then also as the episodes go on, figuring out how it starts to chip away and break away for her?
Yeah, absolutely. Being who she is, and like masking it like we do in real life, and then, but allowing enough of that to be there. So it's like, it's not like, where did that come from? It's like, ooh, I knew, what it's, like someone who shoots up the post office, their friends are like, you know what? I'm surprised, but I got to tell you, there's some things that I saw, so that everything, there's a clarity when you see the whole picture. So yeah, that was definitely great. I mean, Jonathan Levine, our director, was great. We talked about it and being, to discover what, each character, and for me specifically, Carmel's journey is, and just, talked about like, how my ideas and then what was on the paper, and then like, okay, where, oh, maybe I could build here. Can I do this here? And yes, you could do that, and maybe that, so it was great. It was a good collaborative process.
It also feels like a lot of what she's doing is trying subconsciously, probably trying to project this positive energy and subconsciously trying to distract from people looking too closely. And one of the ways that I love watching how that manifests is the fact that she gets very physically close in that very first interaction with Luke Evans, where your face couldn't be closer to him and he's a complete stranger in a store at that point. And was interested in kind of like where that very close body language and getting very close up to a lot of the characters came from.
Yeah, I thought of, the I remember someone said to me, when you do like this to someone, it instinctively makes them do like that. Right? It makes, and the desire to be close to people makes, it's like it makes people not want to be close to you. And so, I felt like with Carmel, it's that it's not understanding that, the social cue that, like, the discomfort that but no harm and no no intention, just a lack of awareness. I think she has a lack of awareness about even social distance. And I don't know if you've ever met people like that, but there are a lot of they are out there, and Carmel is one of them. Especially, I think, at this point in her life, because she longs for it.
Yeah. I once worked with a guy who you didn't even know he was right here until you turned around.
I know, you're like, wait, why? Doesn't that feel wrong to you? Not at all. Yeah, and but still, really, I think with Carmel, the one of the important things was I felt for her when I read it, and I just wanting the humanity of a person, the value of who they are, to show, no matter how complex or, good or bad that they are. I mean, she's not, you know what I mean? To show, and maybe, I mean, I think the whole point of the show is everyone has a story that we don't know. Yeah. And, how do we have compassion for that which we don't know.
Yeah. And then I also wanted to talk about her journey into the moments where we do see some of the physical violence and anger that she's been really suppressing and holding down inside of her body. And the first time that we see that happen as an audience member, it feels a little unexpected, but not completely, because there's been clues and hints that you've been building up until that point. And then obviously we learn quite quickly that this maybe isn't the first time that this is manifested in this way as well. And so how did you really want to kind of like build the momentum towards that moment so that it didn't have that full surprise and it didn't feel completely out of character, even though we haven't seen that behavior from her yet?
Right. Yeah. I think it's kind of, being that emotional complexity, and that you're not surprised by anything from that person, because you sense that something is it's off, and she is friendly and there are attempts, but you do sense like, wow, this person is not in a bad way, so that you don't know what to expect from them. Anger may not be the first thing that you would assume, but you're not surprised because you knew there was something. And I think, but also, I also had the backstory of knowing that she has those issues. So then, I'm able to be like, well, how do I explore that in her being, in her essence, without it having to in a different, in this woman's way, so that it's, she's scary, but not scary. And I don't know. I feel like I'm making no sense.
No, you're making so much sense. And it's interesting because then there's the follow-up moment where they're all in the group session and she's given the bat and there's the mannequin and they're all being kind of tiraded into attacking this. And for her, it's things that her ex-husband said to her. And it's the first moment where it really feels like she's not concerned about people seeing that side of her and her full self. And so were you thinking about that scene and making sure that that felt very different to the moment before where she didn't plan it? It was an unexpected thing. She'd been trying to suppress it. Whereas this is a moment where she really allows herself to lean into that side of her emotions.
Yeah, I don't know that I thought of it that way, only because I don't even remember the order we shot in. I just know I just remember in that moment feeling the full rage, and especially having known who she's around, who she's looking at. And she finally had permission, I feel like. So I don't think that she was even like, I don't know. I think she, something snapped. So she allowed, so it just went there. Like, I think, it was just, I think those comments, those words were so haunting in that moment that there was nothing, it's the same thing with the fork. There was just nothing, I think it just, I don't remember what I was thinking, to be honest. I just remember it was I don't know. I just remember the scene. I do remember the scene.
Yeah. And there's so many details that the script gives in a moment like that, because it gives us a lot of the essence and the types of things that he was saying to her and some of the ways that he was verbally gaslighting her in essence. And so were they part of the scripts that you had at the beginning, or were those some of the scripts that came a little bit later on for you in terms of building that backstory and that history for yourself?
Well, I didn't have them when I said yes to the role, but I had them by the time we were quarantining in Australia. So during the quarantine period, I got to be like, oh, I only read the first two when I got the offer. So yeah, she was much more than I thought. I was like, oh, this will be fun. And I was like, oh, wait, maybe she. I was surprised that she had, because in the first two episodes, yeah, but at that point, I hadn't started really building until I could really read. I think by the time I got to 4, which I was still in LA and I had 4. So by 4, I was like, oh boy, okay. So it kept. Yes, you could keep those moments in mind. And then I could ask, and then I actually had talks with Jonathan to say, where does this character go? And then he explained, so this is what happens. And then,
with the fact that you were mentioning, obviously you had to quarantine when you first got there, and it's so unusual to have that type of immersion with scripts and with a character right before you go into production, because obviously usually running around, everyday life is still happening. And so did that change your relationship with the character in the way that you were able to immerse yourself with her beforehand in any way at all? Or was it still kind of life is still going on at full speed, just on a computer during that time?
I actually thought it was an experiment they put us in. I was like, I don't know, this feels like we're all isolated. I couldn't see any of my castmates. There was like no talking in the hallway. It was like the door opened, it's like, back in your room. So it's and so you really are having zero physical contact with anyone, and not that's in a foreign country. So it's not like, your home, and it's like, So I definitely felt like, very specifically, it felt like it added for all of us. I felt like we got out of quarantine and we were like, and then it was like we're outdoors again. And then we literally went straight from there to where we were going to be shooting in Byron. So it did feel like it felt like it absolutely lent itself to the entire, process, and I think everyone in their characters. And I didn't meet Nicole until she walked, none of us, until she walked on set into the shopper room. So the first meeting in the show is when we first met her.
That's really, really fascinating that was the.
Every day they were like, Nicole's gonna call today. Nicole's gonna FaceTime. I was like, is Nicole here? Is Nicole here? Tomorrow, tomorrow. So they kind of built this anticipation. And then we just looked outside right before we shot and they're like, Nicole's here. So it was kind of like meeting Masha.
Yeah. They literally did. You're right. It was an experiment and they made you live it out as your character in the suspense and waiting, just like Law and Order.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the scenes with Masha, and in particular, the moment where she goes in for her first one-on-one, because the way that you and Nicole play those scenes is so fascinating. The way that Nicole's manifesting this character, barely breaking eye contact, and there's a lot of intensity. And then for your character, she's so enamored by her, and there's a lot of confidence and worth that Masha has that it's very clear that Carmel wishes she could emulate and absorb. And did you think at all about some of the things that she wanted to try and start taking on for herself, and some of the ways in which she might try to start emulating Masha in tiny ways? Or did you want it to be her own version of that?
No, I did. And I don't know if they did it, but there's certain things that Masha does that she does, that Carmel does, because, yeah, for her, Carmel is like a dream. She is, for her, Masha is, for many reasons, as you know, Masha's the world, it's like, who is this woman? And oh, there she is. The woman she's read about and heard about and thought about. And so she finally gets her moment to see her and like, you can only imagine that she imagines what it's like to be her. Masha. So yeah, and it's crazy because only Carmel feels that way. Everyone else is like, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but like Bobby Cannavale's like, all of you all are crazy. But yeah, I think for Carmel, it's a very powerful moment to meet her.
Yeah.
And so me as Carmel, like it was, and I'm a big Nicole Kidman fan, but for me as Carmel too, when she walked in, it was like, oh my God, it happened.
And we'd also be remiss not to talk about the microdosing elements, which starts to play such a huge part, particularly as the dosage goes up for each of these characters. And I was interested in terms of that aspect in what some of the conversations were that you were having with Jonathan and the rest of the cast about what is it that they're actually consuming, how much of it are they consuming, and how does that impact and influence their psyche? Because it makes such a huge impact in terms of what is their everyday self and then how they're affected individually in very unique ways. So for Carmel, what was the journey that you wanted her to go on with that aspect of the story?
Well, gosh, Carmel had very specific concerns about microdosing for many reasons. And I think she definitely wanted to do what the program required. But, I think she thought for her own personal situation, was it okay? And so, we would talk about just as a group, like at this point, how much are we taking? And, for me, it was just also researching what does it make you feel like at this dose, and then at this dose, and then at this dose, and then, do you hallucinate, and when would you, and how does it mix with other things that you might eat or drink or take, in your own personal. So I think for Carmel, it was really figuring out where is she in the dosing, and definitely how is it making her feel. And I think at some points it feels great. I think, like, oh, okay, yeah, it could do it. And it's for Carmel, I think a big thing that's great about it in the beginning is that it allowed her freedom of expression, even when she's like, you know, expressing like, I don't like you very much. um, or whatever it is, I think, and that probably for her, just feeling the freedom to express herself felt great. And then, I think for all of them, it's like, does this feel great anymore? At some point, like, have we overstepped what feels great? So I think, yeah, finding those points and balancing that.
And in working on this show, what are the biggest ways in which you feel this character has allowed you to really grow and learn as an actor?
Um, well, I think anytime one you're working with people who are amazing, I think that helps you grow. One, it makes you are like, I mean, I know working with Nicole, watching the way she thought about a scene or stating just her process. I think being exposed to so many different people's processes and having the time to really create the characters, and also good writing, that helps a lot, and great characters. But yeah, I think the whole thing was amazing for me, to be able not just to do it, but to watch. I loved in the scenes where we had group scenes, watching my cast, like, and being like, I loved watching Michael Shannon and honestly everyone, and being able to really explore those choices and be like, that was great. So I think all of it is all of those experiences make you. I think that's how you get better. The people you work with, your directors, and the time to really be able to find your character.
Yeah. You've brought so much heart to this character and so much great emotional vulnerability. And very genuinely, I feel like I'm rooting for her so much as a character and can't wait to see where her journey goes the rest of the season. Thank you so much, Regina.
Thank you so much for having me.